the later parts, the inundated swathes of land are from the south, which is my home. And if you can find ground in the south, dry land, then it is hard to find the means for shelter, to get the shelter to many areas, let alone food, health, and hygiene, because there are so many in distress from the trauma of displacement, death, and now, of course, disease. So just for context, and you did see some context there in comparisons, are these apples, are these oranges, 33 million people affected are 7 million more than the entire population of Australia. Imagine rescuing, feeding, sheltering, resettling, sometimes what feels like 3 countries or one big, it's beyond the resources, available resources in many ways for any of us, I think. So we have been working round the clock, flat out through the aftershocks, which still continue, but just to pick up the pieces, honestly, ladies and gentlemen, we will literally need a new coalition of the willing. It can be done for wars, so it can be done to save lives. In the monstrous downpour that inundated more than 1/3 of my country, approximately 1,700 people have lost their lives. Again, the numbers keep coming in. And close to 13,000 are injured. 7.9 million are still displaced. And women and children make up 70% of the 33 million affected. 1/3 of all recorded deaths and injuries are children. We are still in the longest rescue and relief and life-saving phase, crossing 16 nightmarish weeks. This is principally because the flooding is of 3 different types: flash flooding, hill torrents, and the monster monsoon have all clustered in one era-defining climate disaster to create new records of extreme weather and water volumes, volatility, and unpredictability. 34 districts are still crisis affected, with 46,000 square kilometers 16 weeks later in fluid conditions, no pun on water, which just again for perspective is more than Switzerland's entire physical area, and an estimated 20.6 people, as defined by this response document, are in need. This number, again, is more than the size of Switzerland and Portugal's population combined. These are not statistics. You saw that. They're not just statistics. These are real people on the ground whose eyes are still vacant from the shock that they faced, because overnight they've been turned into poster children of extreme vulnerability, with futures that are entirely precarious, and particularly for women, who are layered with another burden of compounded social fragility, including campsite predations. So with 11 districts still underwater, it is quite surreal to see the Pakistan Navy deployed in this inland terrain to service those who have survived. We've never had the Pakistan Navy inside the country, but it's had to. Many still are seeking hubs for, land hubs for clean water, food, medical assistance, and tragically, even dry land in the south, in my province, to bury their dead. There wasn't room or time or space to bury their dead. With more than 1,400 health facilities damaged, I will leave Dr. Tedros, who's been kind enough to come here, to tell you more about the risk exposure of millions pushed into fresh peril by the health emergency now menacing the country, because large swathes of the country, particularly in the south, which is lower than sea level now, are still festering under huge swampy lakes of water which has nowhere to drain. 8.2 million people require urgent medical services, while 4% of the disaster-affected population is actually pregnant. We are urgently in need of life-saving medicines, among other things, and that is all part of your appeal document, and I'm sure you can see what else can be sent to the ground. So, Excellencies, for us and for these people that you saw, my people, it is a real race against time. Winter is also coming. Left to the mercy of the open sky, shelters have been made available for 598,000, while over 7.9 million are still scrambling for dry land. As you saw, that the highways have become the dry land where they pitched tarpaulins, and many of these highways are inundated, which we desperately need. as cold weather is very, very near. 4 million people live in areas where temperatures reach sub-zero. And even in the warmest affected areas, the mercury typically falls below 10 degrees centigrade. So winterized tents and goods for the winter, to have them survive another bitter winter, is very much the need of the hour. Nutrition needs to need a scaled up response, as 7.1 million people are still in acute need. And in this appeal, you have 3.9 million targeted, but most priorities are identified for severe and acute malnutrition, with FAO surveys suggesting 9.4, but even more million acres of standing crops inundated and affected. This will directly put at risk for 14.6 million people who live and work very close to nature in the line of a food sector and agriculture crisis. Livelihoods will continue to face severe aftershocks because the cattle, etc., are all drowned. So 15.4 million people will be pushed into hard-scrabble poverty. More. There are already many people. So relief efforts have also been slowed down because the fury of the floods have ripped out over 13,000 kilometers of roads and torn down 440 bridges all over the country, north to south. Railway lines are still not fully restored. They're running trains which stop in the middle because the rolling stock is there, but the lines are not. So I'm here, of course, to ask for the burden to be shared. Meeting the needs on the ground, even for the relief phases, beyond the overstretched capacities of any one country, especially one that has already been paying for climate losses at about 9.1% of our GDP. These are UN numbers. Our export crops are almost all wiped out, particularly in the province of Sindh, which is half the breadbasket of the country. And we will even need to now import huge quantums of food after this flood to feed our population. Given the global energy shortages, our import bills are critically impacted, especially as we compete with far richer countries to pay for clean gas on the international market. We're competing with bids, and very often we are outbid on the international market. So energy is going to be a second crisis. No, one of the many. With debt payments looming and with the farmers and other impacted sectors already demanding loss and damage, as I left Islamabad, the groups of farmers, large swathes of them, the ones who have managed to get on their feet, mostly in Punjab, not in the province of Sindh, which is still not on its feet, are demanding loss and damage compensations from the federal government, completely strapped, including support on agriculture inputs from Islamabad. So all sectors are now going to ask for support. Already the farmers were sitting there barricading all main arteries of Islamabad as I left. They want to know where their livelihoods will come from. So the exogenous shock to the economic system for mobilizing resources is critically high. It's multi-sectoral, and it is impacting our ability to move even supply chains on the ground. We have no space to give our economy a stimulus package, which many countries in Europe do after a climate shock or after the pandemic, and we don't have an envelope to provide jobs or give them the sustainable incomes they need or the future they're so lost without. So really, we are in a long, relentless struggle still to save lives and get the joint surveys out with our development partners by middle or end of October. We are grateful to the INGO sector and Pakistan's civil society, which is already consistently keeping the momentum going on that vital chain or supply chain of essential needs for millions. But it's been very long, and supplies are running out. In government, very few of us, I'll be honest, from the highest levels of public offices to all civil and military officers, have not had a full night's sleep since the flood. We are moving every available resource to the life-saving effort, The government of Pakistan has repurposed all of its existing development and other budgetary envelopes, including all climate adaptation and resilience funds, to continue to provide what we call ex gratia compensations to affected households as the toll of fatalities keeps rising. To ensure that the poor have access to immediate cash, which is cash relief, over $264 million, which is a lot of money in Pakistani rupees, 70 billion Pak rupees, has been disbursed to over 2.4 million people from the affected populations via our Benazir Income Support Program. It is a social security program which is well known to international agencies, and it's been done with complete transparency. This is just a frontline need. This, then, as the UN Secretary General said when he visited Pakistan, is the outcome of mankind's war on nature. And now that nature has unleashed its furies in the first phase of this new long war on mankind, Pakistan, and we feel we are on the front lines of this terrible war. He spoke repeatedly of climate justice, reminding us that the humanitarian crisis that arose from these climate emergencies now need funding mechanisms. There are none. These need to be capitalized for a swift, agile, and transparent transfer of resources from a pool of financing from developed countries that should accelerate the design and delivery of humanitarian aid hit by climate disasters. Countries in the highest category of climate vulnerability and development trajectory, like Pakistan, need urgent, global, institutionalized responses for building defenses against climate disasters. Again, there are none. While we brace for a cascade of medium and long-term impacts, which I will spare you for now, all we are saying is please don't leave us alone to face the front line of what the UN Secretary General said was the outcome of mankind's war on nature. We have fought enough in another 20-year-long militarized war next door to us, where we lost 80,000 people to the war on violent extremism. That was the combined global effort. We had our shoulder to the wheel. And we are no match now for this nature's long war on our doorstep. Absolutely not. It is also clear now that climate disaster zones cause more havoc than active war zones, which contribute to the carbon footprint of the 3-degree world that we are all hurtling towards. Compared to the 3 days spent of monies and resources on a typical war, say the one in Afghanistan, which went on for 20 years, that war spent $300 million per day for 20 years. So this $816 million is very little compared to that. It is a fraction of that money, and it will save millions of lives. If an entire generation is lost to this catastrophe, because the schooling crisis is obviously up next, without livelihoods, education, healthcare, what will we tell our people? The COP27 is coming up. I have to tell them that we must reduce our emissions, but please become a part of a new set of hunger games where eventually only the resilient and better prepared survive. If we don't act to save this front line, what message will we give our destitute and our homeless? Who will build the ark of survival from this biblical flood to save people? Your efforts, thankfully tell us we are all better than that. We all really appreciate your coming here, because really this is just the tip of the iceberg, what we showed you, what I've shared with you. After the immediate relief effort, we will have to look towards rehabilitation and resilience building, which will, of course, require further funding. We are grateful to all present in the room and many others outside. The government of Pakistan and the Prime Minister himself, the entire cabinet, shared their deepest appreciation for the support that the UN Secretary General has mobilized, while his journey to the heart of the catastrophe zones has given us some hope. Friendly governments, too, have been on the move to do what they can. Our development partners, as I said, are busy doing a final needs assessment for end of October or middle of October. I also particularly want to thank the UN resident coordinator, Julian Harnez, who has been living almost permanently in the vortex of the crisis on the ground, for his empathy and stamina. We had to call him back to Islamabad for the meetings needed. Mr. Ramesh Rajasingham, who is here with us, Mr. Martin Griffiths, who's made a special effort, I believe, to join us from New York, and colleagues from the Humanitarian Committee, Save the Children, and other resident missions here. Please, we thank you and share our heartfelt appreciation for clustering with our government agencies for the heavy lift on the ground. That is very much ongoing. And last but not least, I would like to thank Dr. Tedros for his leadership and high-level attention to the extreme risks, health risks that the Pakistani affected populations are facing now. Each country or donor contribution will give back many families their futures, Excellencies. Each contribution will save millions of lives. It will also let us in Pakistan know we are not alone. All of it helps. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister.
वफाकी वज़ीर बराए मौसमियाती तब्दीली शेरी रहमान जिनीवा में फ्लैश अपील की तकरीब से खिताब कर रही थी। उन्होंने कहा कि हर वो डोनेशन, हर वो इमदाद जो पाकिस्तान को दी जाएगी वो पाकिस्तान के अंदर सैलाब मुतासरीन को दोबारा से खड़ा करने में पाकिस्तानी हुकूमत के लिए अहम साबित होगी।
For Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator